Hello, hello, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and the Pittsburgh Penguins back on a winning streak. This is a streaky team, probably the streakiest team in the National Hockey League. Now they are up 2 wins in a row after a crazy game against the Vancouver Canucks at PPG Paints Arena. Horwat, do you agree with what I said on Tuesday whenever I tweeted out that no matter when it is, no matter how good these teams are, Canucks, Penguins at the old paint bucket always provides fireworks?
For some reason, it does. It shouldn't, but it does.
Really shouldn't.
Really shouldn't. There was something weird in the air about that game, though, that the Penguins were pushing early before Vancouver even scored a goal. There was a couple of good opportunities for the Penguins. Vancouver just happened to score their first one right after a couple of big saves from Spencer Martin. One of those unfortunate, hey, we're gaining the momentum, and the first puck's in the back of the net. Mm-hmm. That's never an easy thing to climb back from, let alone letting that happen 2 more times, because yet again, the Penguins had the momentum the entire time, the entire game. It was weird. That's what made the first 7 minutes or so just feel so strange, because the Penguins were the team that was pushing, and yet giving up 3 goals. And maybe there was some bad play here and there from other people aside from Casey DeSmith, but it was interesting watching them dominate play, but yet be down 3-0. And to a lot of it, you could chalk it up to, well, that's hockey. I would, except for the losing streak that we are very close to still, and the one that we had not too long ago. It felt very demoralizing, but then you realize the Penguins were down 3-0, but still looking really good.
Yeah.
And then able to climb all the way back into it before the first period even ended.
Mm-hmm.
I needed a beer in the middle of the game. It was
$17 beer.
Yeah, that's but yeah, no, it was quite a fun game overall, though.
Mm-hmm. When you come home from a long road trip like that, you want to get out to a quick start. And I think you talked to a couple of the players earlier in the day after the morning skate, and they're saying, yeah, we're happy to be home. We're ready to, feed off the energy of the crowd. And boy, was the crowd taken out of it right off the jump. And realistically, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the way that they played as a team, should have won that game a lot easier. It should have been 5-2, maybe even 5-1 at the end of that game. But coin flip Casey just came up on the wrong side on Tuesday. I don't know if you listened to my Penguins to Go, but I had a lot of things to say about Casey DeSmith. But he was taken out in the first period, chased with a -2 point, I believe, 3 goal save above expected, which means they were expected to score maybe a goal. And he gave up 3 in the first 7 minutes of play on 5 shots, including a really, really bad one to Quinn Hughes, which was the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were, and put in Dustin Tokarski. But he steps in, Penguins debut. I thought he stabilized the net for them, as a lot of sometimes goaltending changes do. Not to say that, listen, I know a lot of people are out there saying, hey, he should be the backup, but let's wait and see a little bit more of Tokarski before we bury DeSmith altogether, because, listen, that is just who Casey DeSmith is. He'll show up one day and he'll be, hey, maybe this guy could be a starter at this level. And he'll show up other days and you'll say, maybe he should be playing with Wilkes-Barre.
Yeah, Tokarski's going to get a start, I think. We have a back-to-back coming up. Our next 2 games are Friday, Saturday. Against Winnipeg and Carolina, 2 non-slouches. So we're going to have to step up the way that we just did in the back half against Vancouver, because you have to figure, Dustin Tokarski made big saves. He made that huge save on Pettersson on that break. He made that save without a glove. He made big important stops. But look at the numbers. He didn't face many shots. I forget the exact numbers now. But he didn't face too many. Only 19? He only faced 19 shots. That's not enough, to be honest, even through 2 periods, to make anyone feel comfortable in putting him in as a starter right away. Now, I get he's been both the NHL and the AHL for a long time. But it's still a new situation, still new surroundings. We at least know that we can have confidence in him and that the defense can play in front of him. That is going to be the most important part, regardless of who is in net. Is that defense has to make sure they're not letting shots through either.
Yeah, I mentioned it during the game on Twitter. I said, hey, listen, he's not catching the puck with two hands. And for that, I commend him and I thank him, because that always gave me anxiety about the past with Penguins' third-string goaltenders. And you know who I'm talking about. Cough, cough, Louis Domingue. But no, I thought he was pretty steady in net. I think he did what needed to be done. And listen, I always say, and I said it on yesterday's Penguins to Go, a backup goaltender needs to give your team a chance to win the game. And he gave the Penguins a chance to win the game on Tuesday. Unfortunately for Casey DeSmith, he's no longer the team's backup goaltender, but he's currently slotted in as the starter. So we need a little bit more from him. But let's talk about the rest of the game, because a lot of the Pittsburgh Penguins had really good performances, especially the stars. The top six played particularly well against this Vancouver Canucks team. And Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin both combined to score a goal. Malkin finished with 2 goals and 4 points on the evening, bringing the Penguins in this status courtesy of, I believe, Sportsnet is where I saw it first. Penguins are 99-9-5 all time when 87 and 71 light the lamp. One of the best dynamic duos in history. Honestly, they might go down as the best duo and trio if you throw Chris Letang in there when it comes to games played together, points together, and really, they're up there with Stanley Cups together as well. What did you see from Crosby and Malkin kind of just blowing up on the score sheet against the Vancouver Canucks?
I think Crosby, when do we start having the discussion of is his MVP race back on? Because there was a couple of games there where it slipped away entirely almost because not that Crosby's been not getting enough attention from people outside of Pittsburgh, but when you go on little slumps like that, you're not going to get it. But it is Sidney Crosby, and the attention is still there. Now it's 5 points in the last 3 games, and it's trending back into his direction. But I thought for Malkin, though, 4 points, two huge goals, and then huge shot to help out for Rakell's goal. That's what he needs to get back to as well, is just firing the puck on the power play and being as dominant as he was. It was a dominating game, but not as gallopy. You know how you like to say he has his gallop. He didn't have his gallop per se, but you could see there was drive in his game. And he's had drive in his game all season, and it was one of those games where he got rewarded for it with those 4 points and huge help on the power play as well.
Yeah, no, with Evgeny Malkin, I think when you can see him at his game, I've always mentioned there's times he has that gallop and he's going and you know that he just has something in him. But even on Tuesday, you saw him more involved defensively. And when you see that as well, that's when you know Evgeny Malkin is on his game. People will come out and they'll bash Evgeny Malkin for his defensive play, but he's a pretty solid defensive player when he wants to be. The problem is, in this system, it demands that you play defensively the entire time. That's just not who Evgeny Malkin is. He is not built that way. But because of his pure talent, he's on this roster. Because of his pure talent, he can come out, and even when he's not playing his best defensively, he can produce offensively, and he can be a factor for your team, which is why he was re-signed to that 4-year contract. But I think one of the things you have to take notice of is when he wants to be, Evgeny Malkin can also be a defensive force. He's back. He's helping out his defensemen. He's stealing pucks. We saw it a couple of games ago when he made a really good defensive play to go in on the breakaway against the New Jersey Devils, and he went in and does what he does best, and he finished it, and he put the puck top shelf. He was doing that again on Tuesday against the Canucks, and then as you mentioned, and as a lot of people also mentioned on Twitter, the man is really the engine of the power play. If he is going, the power play is unstoppable. If he's not going, they're fighting uphill. So he was on his game, and so was the power play. Nice to see that get back into the score sheet and onto the column of actually converting chances.
It was needed. It was much needed. Now it's a matter of remaining and sustaining that consistency because, man, going over 21 in 4 games, I think it was like 2 for 26 and during the streak or something like that. Not ideal. clearly this power play can be game changers. They proved it yet again against Vancouver. I mean, when you're down 3-0 and your first goal comes on a 5-on-3, that's something you have to capitalize on. You don't capitalize on that 5-on-3, fans are leaving after the first period.
I was worried. I saw that and I was like, oh, if they do not score on this 5-on-3, this game could be over already. Obviously, they were down 3-0 at the time too.
You don't have to score on both of them. You don't have to score on both penalties. It'd be nice too and be a huge help. But get one of them and get the first one maybe at least. Or fans are, like I said, fans are gonna dip. They're gone. It was a weeknight. It was cold. I was cold, and you're coming out of a streak that, you're one game removed from, but the fans don't want to see that nonsense from you. Mm-hmm. You had to score there to save quite a lot of the game and quite a lot of your fan base, and they did. So it's not all a wash, but it built back into that 3-goal, coming back from the 3-goal deficit, and that's no less coming out of no practice and a travel day to Montreal.
Yeah.
That's a big emotional weekend there, or a couple of days there. Tack on going down 3-0 early. This team's got guts sometimes. They have to show it a little more often, but they do.
Yeah, they ended up pulling it out in the end, and really the underlying numbers were impressive for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but it was also, we mentioned, the star stepped up. It wasn't just Crosby and Malkin. Rickard Rakell adds a goal where it looked like it might have just hit him and then fallen at his feet. Picks up the garbage, puts it in. Power play goal. Nice to see from Ricky Rax. And Jason Zucker, another goal. A nice little knuckle puck there in honor of baseball being, I don't know, like 75 days away. I don't know. Knuckle puck throws in the old softie, and that's 2 goals in 2 games for Jason Zucker. And can we just talk about Zucker for 1 minute? Because I saw Rob Rossi put out an article. I saw Josh Yohe's tweet first, and Josh Yohe, of course, of The Athletic, said on Twitter, maybe he makes more money currently than you'd like, but Jason Zucker deserves a contract offer from the Penguins before he becomes a UFA. Perfect fit for the system, fast, physical, and works his ass off. And honestly, I could not agree more with what Yohe said. And then, of course, if you want more elaboration from the Athletic staff, like I mentioned, Rob Rossi has a nice article out on it. And when you look at the way Jason Zucker has played this year, because I've always tried to hold out for Jason Zucker. I feel like he's struggled with injuries the past 2 seasons. He looked really good in that first little sample size when he came over, but this is what we expected of Jason Zucker when he was traded for Kalen Addison and a first and Alex Galchenyuk. But this is what was expected from Jason Zucker. I think the Penguins, I agree, should look into re-signing him. I know a lot of people are saying, listen, this team is old enough, and we are locked into basically everyone else on the top 6. Maybe you try getting some new blood up there, but why would you? In my opinion, he has been the most consistent winger for the Pittsburgh Penguins this season, and that's saying a lot considering the inconsistencies that he has had over his tenure here in Pittsburgh, because he always brings that level of play. He's almost never invisible on the ice for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and now he's on a 20-goal pace, which is exactly what the Pittsburgh Penguins acquired him to do. Be a 20 to 25-goal scorer, be physical, force the issue on the forecheck, and turn things into the direction of the Pittsburgh Penguins every single time he's out there on the ice. He's done that so far this season alongside of getting Malkin.
Yeah, no, he totally has. There is a fair conversation, a question to be had about him, signing a new deal and coming back next season, even at his age. And I think it's always a fair conversation to have, because that's when the money starts talking and you start to discuss term, price tag, what does that all look like. But for now, I think, he's totally earning himself a new contract of sorts with this team, because it's exactly what we want now. The guy doesn't take a shift off. He's going 1,000 miles a minute every time. And, after his last 2 seasons, it's finally starting to find the back. He's finally starting to find the back of the net again.
Yeah.
He's starting to look much better. He's, whenever the second power play unit's going, he's usually part of it. And he's got good drive. We saw it in the playoffs last year. We know the guy doesn't quit. And now we're seeing it fully healthy. We're seeing it kind of come through for him. Contract discussions are something to have later, but I think for now, we can all agree that he does deserve something here.
And looking at that contract right now, he's in the final year of a deal that pays him $5.5 million for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I don't think you re-sign him to that. If you're going to re-sign him, it's going to have to be similar to what we saw from Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang, whereas, hey, you're taking less money, but you're staying with this group. It seems like Jason Zucker is a locker room guy. It seems like Jason Zucker loves to play in Pittsburgh. But again, that's what it seems like from the outside. You never know truly, but it seems like he's a real big fixture for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I enjoy watching him play hockey for one. I think he's one of the more physical players on the Penguins, as we've mentioned, which sometimes I'd like to see that a little bit. We saw it on Tuesday where he absolutely lit up Connor Garland. I almost said Darius Garland. That's incorrect. But Connor Garland, he just completely blew him up in the neutral zone, was easily the Subway sandwich of the game, which is what I will always call it. But no, looking at what that contract could look like, I don't want to see them sign a 31-year-old to a 5-year deal again. We saw that all last offseason where the 30-plus-year-olds aren't getting veteran contracts. They're getting actual longer contracts, but that might be what he's looking for. I mean, depending on what he wants, does he want to win a Stanley Cup or does he want to cash out on a really good season late in his career? Because he might be looking for that one last big Brian Rust contract where it's, hey, it's 5 years, keeps me in the same spot for a while and kind of winds my career down. Or would he be willing to take a 2-year deal? Because I think that would be a perfect bridge there for Zucker, which would line him right up with Sidney Crosby's remainder of his current contract.
That would be a good little deal. We just know contract talks are always hard, especially whenever they happen in the offseason. They're always a little more bloated. It's rare that you see a free agent sign and go for 2 years. I mean, they usually have to already be older, so that one will depend. But one thing I'll say to it is don't make sure, if possible, if at all possible, make sure there's not a clause strapped to it. I mean, everyone and their mother is getting no trade, no move, modifieds these days. It's hard to roll through a cap friendly, see a player that might be an option and go, oh, look, there's an open trade. Never mind. There's a trade clause attached to it, so it becomes a little more difficult.
Yeah.
If at all possible, that's what I'm saying. Try and get something that's a little easier to move if you need to because of the hard miles he's putting on, the age that he's going to be at, and possibly the price because you just don't know right now what he's looking for.
Yeah.
And if you need to dump it off, you got to dump it off. So, yeah, I think 2 years sounds perfect, but again, that's rare. Those are rare.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, and we'll finish on this, and then we'll cut to our next segment where we talk about potential return of a Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman, which would be huge for the lineup. But let me finish with this, Horwat. If the Pittsburgh Penguins announced that Jason Zucker had been signed for 2 years, $3.75 million with a full no move clause, would you be okay with that?
See, you sweetened it by saying it's 2 years at $3.75. It's a little better.
You know why I say that, right? It's the contract Jeff Carter signed last season.
Difference is Jeff Carter's 37.
Yeah, he's 37, but also you also have to throw and he plays center where Jason Zucker doesn't. But also Jason Zucker produces more as a top 6 winger. I would take, if Jason Zucker signed to the Jeff Carter contract, I would take it. The only problem is Jeff Carter is currently signed to that contract and doesn't deserve it, right?
Yeah, and because it's Jeff Carter, and Brian Hextall, there just seems to be something there. Everyone keeps talking about a trade for Jeff Carter. That's not happening.
No, I mean, they're not. No. I was trying to think of like something else to say to kind of like combat that. There's nothing to combat that. There's probably not one happening.
Yeah, ever since we traded for him, there was talks of he's not going anywhere. He's going to retire here, or if we fire Hextall early, or wherever Hextall goes, because Jeff Carter didn't want to get traded out of LA. He got traded out of LA because his buddy Brian Hextall took over the front office of the Penguins.
Ron,
and
are you purposely doing that?
Oh, shoot.
I was about to say, that's like a morphed Pittsburgh Penguins front office, Brian Burke, Ron Hextall combination.
But then I remember Brian Hextall's also a real person.
Yeah.
Yes, Ron Hextall. Now I need to double check my last 3 days. Anyway. Yes, Hextall in the front. That's his buddy Ron Hextall in the front office. And not only did he, because you have to remember all of the things that have happened with Hextall and the Penguins, Hextall, Carter, and the Penguins ever since. He was protected from the protected from the draft lottery, from the expansion draft.
Yeah.
Given a 2-year deal with a full no move and pretty much guaranteed he'd retire here. And I think the protection's the big one that we're all forgetting about happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's not going anywhere. Because I guarantee if Hextall didn't give him the promise of staying there because Carter didn't want to move, he said he would rather retire than get traded again.
Mm-hmm.
Got traded again, he's still playing. Hextall gave him all kinds of promises that he has to hold to.
Yeah.
We're locked in with Jeff Carter, guys. Get used to it. At least we're looking to experiment with him on the wing. That's a good sign. That's a good start. We can get a new 3C somewhere. But again, those are talks for down the line. If to anyone saying Jeff Carter's getting traded, no, he's not. No, he is not.
It would be a surprise to most if Jeff Carter was traded from the Pittsburgh Penguins this season. But we're going to take a quick break. When we return, could a Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman be coming back into the lineup as early as this weekend? We'll talk about that right after this quick break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. And if you want to be a sponsor, just reach out at Nick_Brlansky at Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, and we'll get something figured out. Looking at you, Pittsburgh Clothing Company. But could a defenseman be coming back this weekend? We both love that company, by the way. That's literally no shade. Could a Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman be coming back this weekend? Look at the moves that happened on Wednesday with the roster. The Penguins send Mark Friedman back to the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins of the AHL and concurrently place Ryan Poehling and Tristan Jarry on the IR, retroactive to, of course, when they first popped up on the injury report. Horwat, what that made me first think of is, okay, Friedman was currently stashed in as the 7th defenseman on the Pittsburgh Penguins. They don't have any other injuries on the forward side that we know of since Tuesday. Could this mean that a Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman is set to return? We'll know more today, of course, with Pittsburgh Penguins practice, and you will be there to report it first. But how important would a return of either Chris Letang, who was originally day-to-day and I believe has missed the last week, Chris Letang, who is day-to-day with a lower body injury, or Jeff Petrie, who, as of right now, we're unclear of his status, but is skating with an upper body injury. How big would either of their returns be for this Pittsburgh Penguins lineup?
Oh, huge. They'd stabilize the power play. Let's start there. They'd go back to their position. I mean, regardless if it's whichever one it is, they'd go back to manning the first line right side. But more importantly, they're going to stabilize the power play because while Ty Smith has stepped in nicely and has improved with every game that passes, it's not his position. It's just not. It's going to be Petrie's or Letang's, whichever one returns. I'm assuming it'll be Letang, by the way, because Petrie, you got other moves need to be made still, reasons. So I think Chris Letang is the more likely person to come back. So it stabilizes the first power play unit. Ty Smith moves to the second, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, maybe you get Jeff Carter off that damn unit, and you got 2 defensemen down there with P.O. and Ty Smith who I would assume worked together. No, they did not work together in the AHL. I got to get used to this. Yeah, but it stabilizes the first power play, adds an extra defenseman with some good offensive firepower to the second. Mm-hmm. That's what I see coming from this.
Yeah, I completely agree. When you look at the Pittsburgh Penguins right side right now, it is debilitated with injuries. When you have 2 players that make up the majority of your salary on that defensive unit, there's a reason they get paid that much, and it's because they're the 2 best defensemen on the team when they're fully healthy and when they're playing to their potential. So you need somebody like that back. It also allows a guy like Jan Ruda to be pushed down in the lineup back into a role that he's more comfortable with. It also gives Ty Smith potentially an opportunity to go up against lesser talent where he's already performing at a really high level, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if it's Chris Letang, the Penguins obviously are better with Chris Letang on the ice. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, and if they do try to tell you otherwise, they're just not sure of what hockey is at this point in their life. And if it's Jeff Petrie, let's not forget that Petrie Pettersson, I don't know if that's going to be the pairing whenever everybody gets healthy, but it is such a good pairing. And I've said it so many times, so I don't need to dive into it again. But that is one of the best pairings in the National Hockey League this season when they're playing together. I wouldn't hate to see that be put that back together and see P.O. Joseph with Chris Letang. But we've talked about this when fully healthy ad nauseum. Regardless of who it is a massive boost to the Pittsburgh Penguins lineup. We've seen them struggle with defense over the past week that they've both been out. They need these guys back in the lineup, and to get one, let alone both back in the next, couple weeks would be huge for this team, especially considering Tristan Jarry is still going to be out. It looks like for maybe a week, maybe a little longer. He's day to day, but as Mike Sullivan said on Tuesday, it's not something where he can play today or tomorrow, but he is certainly not a longer term injury.
And that's a big bonus. It's not longer term. Those invisible injuries are hard to deal with.
They're scary, man.
Yeah, and the fact that he's skating already, and the fact that he was only dumped to IR with a retroactive date, by the way, of when it happened, and that's a good bonus because that means literally if he's ready to go Friday, Saturday, he's not going to be. But if he was to be, he's good. He's safe. He can return at any point now. Him and Palin can just come back at any point. I would assume the IR moves is to free up roster positions, nonsense stuff, that back end stuff. But the fact that Tristan Jarry shouldn't be out long term is a huge help for the Penguins lineup for that goaltending. I mean, Dustin Tokarski stepped up nicely, but man, it's not what you expect every day.
Yeah, that's a Band-Aid on a leak right there. Eventually, the leak's going to keep coming through. You need Tristan Jarry back in this lineup if you want to climb up that Metropolitan Division, which, hey, shout out to the Philadelphia Flyers. They got a nice win over the Washington Capitals yesterday. Travis Konechny would be a great addition to any team, honestly. If the Flyers are looking to move him, which he has 2 years left on his contract, I highly doubt it. But speaking of defense, if we see Letang or Petrie, you say it's probably Letang if one or the other ends up coming back. We'll see later today at practice. But if either of them come back, Ty Smith needs to remain in this lineup for a little bit longer at least, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. There's harder moves to make if it's Ty Smith staying in and Jeff Petrie coming back. But regardless, I think Ty Smith has definitely earned his position in this lineup. He's earned the opportunity to at least play on his side of the ice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Guy's played 5 games here. All 5 of them have been on his off wing. Mm-hmm. He's at least earned the chance to be given a chance on his proper side and seeing what he can do in a different situation. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I was trying to run down defensive options for a couple days now, a couple weeks now, a couple months, a left side that goes, fantasy land here for now, but a left side that goes Joseph, Pettersson, Smith. I don't hate that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you got to do some maneuvering that involves taking Brian Dumoulin out of this lineup somehow. But it's definitely very possible because then that makes your right side about as solid as it's ever been, and Letang, Petrie, and Ruda. So there's your defense. That's the way I'd like to see it.
Yeah, and here's the thing, too. When Ty Smith was called up, he was essentially looked at as the 9th defenseman on the Pittsburgh Penguins because he was called up after Mark Friedman.
Yeah.
It took another injury for him to get called up. But now that Mark Friedman's been sent down, considering what we've seen from Ty Smith, I think the organization has moved him up on their organizational depth chart above Friedman. Also, I would say that he's probably above Chad Ruhwedel, considering where he's playing in the lineup. Because he's playing on his off wing above Chad Ruhwedel with a worse defenseman in Brian Dumoulin.
And stabilizing him.
And, oh my God, more than stabilizing him, he is pulling performance out of Brian Dumoulin. The numbers, according to Natural Stat Trick, I have them down here because it's ridiculous. 5-game sample size. Mm-hmm. But think about how bad Brian Dumoulin has been this season. Think about the defenseman he's played with this season. Again, talked about it Tuesday on Penguins to Go. But Dumoulin could not be stabilized by Chris Letang. He could not be stabilized by Jan Ruda, who is a defensive defenseman, who's considered the defensive defenseman on the right side there. The guy that's going to really solely focus on their own end. But with Ty Smith, he has 63.5% of the shot attempts at 5.5 and 5. 66% of the expected goals for, and 62% of the scoring chances. This has been the Penguins' best defense pairing over the past 5 games. And think about what we've always said. There was a show, I believe it was in December, we said, oh, you know what? They're demoting Dumoulin for a reason because he has the most goals allowed than anybody else in the National Hockey League. In the past 5 games, Dumoulin and Smith went on the ice together at 5-on-5, which has been a lot of the time, 0 goals. 0 in 5 games. Ty Smith is not a defensive defenseman, but what he does stabilizes Brian Dumoulin and allows him to play closer to what we expect from Brian Dumoulin and has turned Dumoulin into a good defenseman. My only hope is that he didn't turn Dumoulin into a good defenseman at his own expense. Now that they're going to say, hey, look at Dumoulin. He's performing better. We don't need Ty Smith in the lineup. We need Brian Dumoulin. But I think Ty Smith, when you look at the numbers like that, and listen, these numbers are available to the powers that be in the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. I think they look at this and they say, listen, not only is Ty Smith an offensive powerhouse when it comes to carrying the puck out of the zone, when it comes to offensive potential, when it comes to stepping up in the rush, but he's really helping out one of our biggest struggling defensemen of the season. I think there needs to be something to take into consideration that he is probably their 6th best defenseman when you look at the organizational depth chart, and he deserves to be in that lineup. And I think that honestly, him and Jan Ruda would be a really good pairing.
I think so too. I think it'd be a very good pairing, especially for the third set there. I mean, Ty Smith he's a good young player, but he's got the future ahead of him. We don't have to force him up the lineup yet. We don't have to. No. The same goes for P.O. Joseph, but we're still saying, but we're at the point of put him with in the first line because we don't have the greatest of options otherwise, and we want to see Pettersson and Petrie stick together. So there's that little caveat, but we know Ty Smith has the future here. We know that we can hang on to him. I mean, the fact that he started the season off in the minors it doesn't hurt his performance in the league, but it does help the fact that he's an RFA at the end of the year looking for a new contract. You say, hey, you started your season in the minors. We didn't see as much of what you could do in the NHL. Well, there you go. You bumped his price down a little bit.
Yeah.
Business, baby.
Yeah.
But regardless, we have a lot of faith in the kid. We know he's going to be a good player. The Penguins are aware that he can be something in the future. So you don't have to force him all the way up the lineup just yet. You stick him on that third line. But you also know you have faith in him. He can man the second power play unit with P.O. Joseph even. And you've seen how much confidence this team has in him. He's led the team in minutes once or twice already. That's a rare thing. In 5 games, no less. And that's also excluding the Winter Classic game where we played with 7 defensemen. I think he only played 10.
Yeah.
But that happens. This team has faith in him. First game in, all right, you're manning the first power play unit. Welcome to the team. Yeah, this team has faith in him. I hope he gets to stay at the NHL roster when it's all said and done here. But it's going to be tough. Other moves need to be made. They need to be made quickly. Yeah,
and we can get into this more on a different day, but I mentioned that Smith Dumoulin has been probably the best analytically defensive pairing the Penguins have had over the past 5 games. Unfortunately, one of the worst. And I said this whenever they made that pairing for the first time. I said, Joseph Ruhwedel, I'm excited to see what that can do. It has done nothing. It has been bad. Yeah. It has been a struggle bust of a stretch for those two. And it kind of makes you question, hey, yeah, do we really throw P.O. Joseph up there? Is it his struggling performance? Is it just that these two don't mesh and it doesn't work well at the NHL level? I don't know. But those two are currently struggling to put out some positive results on the back end. But we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're just going to close this out with a nice little game of Name That Stat Line. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. We haven't played this in a while, but with the Penguins playing on Tuesday, crazy game, but also having 2 days off before that, having a day off after that with no practice. Let's just get into this. It's a game of name that stat line, and for the uninitiated is where I bring up a stat line. Nick Horwat on the other side of me tries to guess which player I'm discussing. Sometimes we go back into the history. Sometimes we go into the previous season. Sometimes we just jump around altogether. But this time, we're going to look at stat lines for players projected out the rest of the season, what they're on pace to do on this current team. Okay? So basically, I'll tell you what they're on pace to be. Horwat has 3 guesses to see whether or not it's right, and you can play along at home. And it's also going to be a nice conversation about where people are currently with the Pittsburgh Penguins.
That's going to be tough because I'm not good at projections.
Well, this first one, this man is on pace to score 29 goals this season, finish with 51 assists, and come just shy of a point per game with 80 points. Horwat, can you name that stat line of that Pittsburgh Penguin?
29. Is it Evgeny Malkin?
It is correct. That is Evgeny Malkin, who is on pace to be just shy of that 82 point per game pace. But he's currently, that 4-point game has gotten him right back up into the 80. So we'll end up being able to see what he's able to do going forward after he had a little bit of a cold streak, as did the rest of the top 6 for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But currently, Evgeny Malkin has 14 goals, 25 assists for 39 points in 40 games this season. And like we mentioned, on pace for 80 points. I've loved everything I've seen from Evgeny Malkin this season. I know a lot of people were a little wary of giving him a 4-year deal, but hey, this season, no issues with that whatsoever, because he has been an absolute ball of fire for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And the reason that they have a lot of wins, I don't know if the NHL has wins above replacement. I think they do somewhere, maybe Jay Fresh player cards, but I would imagine that he has a lot of wins above replacement.
He's throwing a nice game out there.
Yeah. Not a perfect game, but, he's giving you a good start, quality start, 7 innings, maybe 2 runs scored. Better than anything the Pirates are going to do this year.
Rich Hill, baby.
And Vince Velasquez.
Good Lord.
Yeah. But no, Evgeny Malkin has been really good. Yeah, that depressed me a little bit too. Opening day, 2 months away, 2.5. But this next stat line, let's stay in hockey because it's less depressing. This next stat line, this player is going to score 21 goals if he stays on this current pace, finish with 35 assists, and score 56 points. A healthy amount for this player that has not hit that mark with the Pittsburgh Penguins yet in his tenure. 21 goals, 35 assists, 56 points. Horwat, can you name that stat line?
So the fact that we're at game 40 is really helping me out here. I just pretty much have to cut that in half and figure out who's that. Jason Zucker.
That is Jason Zucker. Are you looking at the current stats right now?
No, but I'm
good.
Just recalling that Malkin's just shy of a point per game, and that little hint on the last one helped. And you saying he hasn't hit this before. Plus, I think Zucker just scored his 10th.
He did
the other night. All right.
He scored his 9th on what was the game before that? I can't remember who they played, but the last game of the road trip against the Arizona Coyotes, he had a beautiful goal where he crossed across the net front, put it top shelf. And then, of course, we talked about the knuckle puck goal that he scored on Tuesday. But yeah, he's on pace for 21 goals. And if I told you that at the beginning of the season, hey, Jason Zucker's going to give you 21, you'd say, yeah, that's fair. I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah. After what we've had the last 2 seasons, yes.
Yeah, and not to mention all the other intangibles that he brings to the game. This one is going to be pretty hard. Horwat, very rarely do you go 3 for 3 without missing a guess. But this one's going to be a little bit more difficult. Went into the well a little bit for this one. This player is on pace for 9 goals this season, 19 assists, and 28 points. You do have one hint on this one if you'd like to take it, or if you'd like to go for the hat trick on it, the natural hat trick on name that stat line, you can by trying to guess this player. Can you name that stat line on pace for 9 goals, 19 assists, and 28 points?
I mean, I'm going to take a shot at it. Is it P.O. Joseph?
It is not. It is not.
I don't know what made me say that, but
it is a defenseman.
Figured. That's because you said it's how many goals?
9.
So it has like 4 right now.
Not necessarily. I'd said this is a little bit more of a hard one. The first couple, I knew there was a little chance that they would be too easy for you. So I tossed you a curveball on this one. You have 2 more guesses. Do you want your hint?
No, it's Jeff Petrie.
No, it is not Jeff Petrie.
Then yes, I'd like the hint.
The hint is this player. Oh, this is going to give it away.
Probably.
This player was acquired this past offseason.
I would have said Jeff Petrie again. Who else did we acquire this past off? Jan Ruda?
It is not Jan Ruda. You got it incorrect. On pace for 9 goals and 28 points this season is Ty Smith.
Because he hasn't played a lot.
Because he has one goal, 3 points in 5 games played. If he played the rest of the season at that pace, he'd finish with 9 goals, 28 points.
That's fair. Yeah,
which is a pretty good season regardless, let alone for half of a season.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, just to go back into what we were talking about last segment, Ty Smith is as advertised.
Yeah. And got to remember, we will be at the halfway mark of this season in between our back-to-backs.
Yeah. After the game against Winnipeg.
So everyone get your takes ready.
Yeah, and those 2 games are going to be interesting because Winnipeg, yesterday was the first day that I really looked at standings across the league. Normally, I just check in on the Metropolitan and I X out of the standings whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But Winnipeg is in 2nd place in the Central Division right now. The Colorado Avalanche are in 6th. I know that they're facing injuries, but what's the deal? What is going on?
The Central's in a weird spot.
Yeah,
they're in a weird spot because they're being led by Dallas at 56 points.
Yeah,
which is up there. That's a fair number. But Winnipeg wasn't supposed to be that great. Minnesota's doing good, especially after a cold start from Fleury.
Yeah.
St. Louis is in free fall yet.
They're in no man's land, aren't they?
They're in a weird position because they have
yeah, go ahead.
Because they have huge names possibly getting traded. Those 2 huge names are injured right now. But also they've kind of hit a cold streak, but also Jordan Binnington can't make a damn save. But they're also still kind of winning games. They're winning enough to, I believe, be in a wild card spot. So St. Louis is in a very awkward situation. They're just out of one.
Mm-hmm.
They're 2 points behind Edmonton for a wild card spot, who, by the way, also don't be shocked if Edmonton misses, guys.
Connor McDavid's almost at the 82-point mark, 40 games into the season, and this team isn't even a playoff spot. So if you're worried about the Penguins at this moment in time, at least you're not the Edmonton Oilers, who are absolutely wasting one of the best players in the history of the league in their actual prime. Like we joke about Sidney Crosby's in his prime until he retires, but Connor McDavid is literally in his prime, ready to break records from like the 90s with scoring records. And they're not in a playoff spot because Jack Campbell was an awful signing. I was watching that game last night. It was Edmonton and Anaheim. They brought up the starting goaltender statistics. It was Jack Campbell versus John Gibson. They're both in the 800s in save percentage. And over 3.3 goals allowed per game. I was like, what is going on in both of these cities? Like, I know Anaheim's not good, but
Yeah, I was about to say.
But geez, it is strange. And like you mentioned, that might be the sabotage factor for your whole Ryan O'Reilly theory. If you haven't read about Horwat's Ryan O'Reilly theory, it's at InsideThePenguins.com. Obviously, it's about Ryan O'Reilly of the St. Louis Blues potentially being traded. Are they even sellers? Like, that's the problem right now, is who's a buyer, who's a seller. That's where you have to get. We'll start getting into more trade deadline talk as it approaches, as that is on March 3rd of 2023. Like we said, we'll talk about that as it comes closer. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, you can always check us out on YouTube at Inside the Penguins. Make sure you like and subscribe there. You can download and subscribe on any podcasting platform you like, and leave a review if you would. 5 stars would be appreciated. 4 stars, I'll take it. 3 stars, just leave your opinion to yourself, okay? But that's going to do it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.